Yeah.
So first question is always, what or who or how did you get started in rug making?
So I learned from my mother, who learned in her adulthood. She wasn't a lifelong hooker. She didn't learn from her mother or anything. And it was kind of funny because I resisted for years. I just thought, I don't need another craft mom. Thanks. I've got plenty of unfinished projects lying around my house. She taught me how to craft when I was very young, learned how to needlepoint and all the things. But I just resisted for years. And then one year I was helping take care of her after surgery because she wasn't allowed to lift anything over like 2 pounds or something ridiculous. Um, and since I'm self-employed, I was able to just go and run my business from there. And she was kind of harping me again. And she might have been actually hooking something that I found a little bit more interesting this time. And so I just thought, okay, fine, I'll learn how to hook. She had one of those little kits. And it was just three little baskets with little flowers, popping out of them. And it was like the crack cocaine of craft. I was instantly hooked.
Yeah.
And the next day we went to Joann's and a fabric store here and got some burlap. I didn't know what else to use at that point because she was not into designing or anything. She just liked the hooking.
Okay.
But yeah, the very next day we went out, I got some burlap and she had a bunch of material that somebody had just given her, some old skirts and stuff. And I went at it and it was, I never looked back. I finally found my medium. I was like, I love this so much. So yeah, so my mom is responsible.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally relate to the crack cocaine. I mean, not that I've done crack cocaine, but
No,
that's how I
right?
felt. That's how I felt. It was like, I need more, like now.
Yeah, it was crazy. I lived in Chicago at the time. And when I got back to my, pardon me, my apartment, I would shut down shop around 6 or 7, my consulting business, and I'd go get a bite to eat, and then I would go and sit in the patio, and maybe have the TV on, but mostly listening to books on tape, which were actually on tape back in those days. Um, and it was 2 in the morning. It was, and my neck's all crooked, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
but if I just get these couple more loops in, it'll be okay. I just know it.
It's worth it.
It is so worth it. But yeah, I mean, I was hooking for hours every day after my regular job, and
Yeah.
I just loved it. I just loved it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I can relate.
Mhm.
Do you have a part of the process that is your favorite? Like, I give these as examples, but planning a new rug, working on a rug, finishing the rug, or shopping or collecting supplies, or in your case, maybe dying. I don't know. Is there one that you can be like, oh, this is it every time?
It's hard because I really do love all the parts. And of course, I love to dye. As a natural dyer, I love the dyeing. But I really think that when I reflect on it, it's the actual hooking.
Mm.
Um, Although I get pretty lost in the design phase as well. I like repeat pattern, and I like, design and uh, color and all of those things. But the act of hooking is just really, you know, meditative for me, and it takes me right out of my head, and I feel like it grounds me. It gets me back to earth and back to myself, really. Um, Funnily enough, the when we go on vacation, oftentimes it takes a while. This is a common phenomenon. It takes somebody to go on a week vacation, they need another week because they've just finally settled down.
Mhm.
Um, and I used to go to a hooker camp with my mom every year, and it was the one thing I would go and I was instantly there. And my job and data and consulting, it was nowhere to be found. I was instantly there. All things were turned off. Early on, I didn't have a phone or anything anyway. I didn't even bring my computer. And it was just such a wonderful week to get back to me.
Mm.
And I feel like the creativity of it does that, but I really feel that a lot when I'm hooking, when I'm just pulling those loops.
Mhm. Yeah, there's something about the simplicity, I think, the
Yeah.
magic of that.
and the
But it's
repetitiveness with the color and the shape all kind of coming together, and
mm,
yeah, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's really, it's very soothing for me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I can agree. Um,
Mhm.
is there something that you wish you'd learned earlier in your journey of rug hooking, or something that you feel like is really important to share with new hookers? Like, do you feel
Mm.
like there's something or some things that
Well, for me, those are two pretty different questions. The first one is definitely, I wish I'd learned how to natural dye,
uh
like right away. Um, because when I first started dyeing, I did learn how to dye because that's kind of a progression that people go through.
yep.
It's pretty common for those of us who like to design. We're like, okay, now I need to actually learn how to make my own wool, the right
Yeah.
colors. Um, and it was kind of a means to an end for me. The dyeing, I didn't hate it. But I didn't love it. It was just again a means to an end, and I did enjoy mixing colors and coming up with things. But when I found natural dyes, it was just like my whole world opened up in a very different way. So I do wish I'd learned how to natural dye earlier. But for somebody who's first starting out, I don't know. I think I was in a really supportive environment. Like I said, my mom taught me how to hook, and not long after, a couple months after that, there was a new camp that was starting in Holland, Michigan, and none of her guild wanted to go because it was very close to where she lived. She lived in South Bend, which is right on the border of Michigan, and they were all going to two other camps every year anyway. She used to go to West Virginia, the Ripley camp, and then she would go to the one in Rockford. And so those were in the spring and the fall. And so this one was going to be in the summer, and she really, really wanted to go. And I just thought, I just couldn't wrap my brain around this whole concept of hanging out for a week and hooking, even though I loved it so
I
much.
know. Yeah.
Um, it was just hard to understand. And I was a very different hooker when I got there. I got a lot of those, oh, that's interesting
Yeah, I
comments that
remember.
people like to give you. Oh, that's interesting. I was like, okay, yeah, something you'd never do. And they always wanted to know, well, do you have a place for that? And I'm like, in my heart. I have a place for it in my heart. I don't know where it's gonna go. I just wanna hook this.
Yeah.
But they were all super encouraging, and so I think that there was one person at that camp who was a teacher who was very, very strict about, "This has to be done this way, and these are kind of the rules of the game, and you have to do, this technique exactly this way. You have to turn a corner this way, or you have to, very, very rigid." And I just remember thinking, "Wow, I'm not ever gonna go there. I won't survive."
Yeah.
So I guess my advice for somebody starting out would be, just trust your own instincts and desires and what you enjoy and be creative. There really are no rules. Learn how to hook, but then, explore and do what you love. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to remember those words like a place in my heart when somebody asks me because I do get that question too. And I'm like, oh, like that just feels like, oh, yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. It has a place in my heart. Yes, it has a place. It has a
Yeah.
place in my heart. I don't need to know where it's gonna go.
Yeah. Like it just needs to
I
be
always found that
made.
such a funny question. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, it reminds us how some people are so incredibly practical. And
Oh,
that's not
right.
something I am usually
Yeah.
I do not align with practicality. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, my dog is going crazy.
Oh,
Um,
no worries.
but I
For me,
do have a question about your first comment, the
mhm.
what you wish you'd learned sooner. How did you discover natural dye? Like what happened to be like, oh, now I learned about acid dyes, but now I need to know about this. Is there a story there?
It's weird. I don't know exactly how I learned about it. I think I either heard a story on the radio or read an article online, and I just remember the instant feeling when I heard somebody talking about natural dyes, and my brain just exploded. I was like, "Wait, what? I can do this with nature?"
Yeah.
holy smokes, it didn't ever occur to me, which is just crazy because I used to live in France and I used to see all those tapestries and all those textiles, the European textiles that are just amazing. And I don't know why it never occurred to me that they were natural dyes, because duh, they didn't even have synthetic dyes until the mid 19th century. So everything before the mid to late 19th century is natural dyes. And I have spent my entire adult life working on sustainability in agriculture and the environment, environmental programs. And so this was like something just was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And I immediately signed up for a workshop with a woman I'd never heard of, but who is very famous as a weaver. She literally wrote the book on shibori weaving. She figured out how to do shibori in a loom, and I had the great fortune that she was my first teacher. And so, like within months, 2 months of finding out about natural dyes, I was at camp in Arrowmont and learning how to do natural dyes, and I have never looked back. It just brings me such joy, and I just love it.
Wow. Well, yeah, that feeling that you talk about, it's so exciting when I hear other people articulate that feeling that is almost something that you can't articulate.
Right. It's
And I
hard,
have, yeah, I felt it at different moments. Certainly when I first started hooking, it was like, whoa.
right?
And I resisted the dying. Like I was like, I don't need to die. I don't need the stuff. I don't need to. I just don't. And then it
Mhm.
was like, okay, I'll try.
Mhm.
And then I feel like a magician in the kitchen when because I do dye now, not an expert because
Very well.
yeah,
Oh, no,
well,
you dye very well. I love your dyes.
um,
Yeah.
well, I feel like it's all magic because I'm not one to take rigorous
It
notes and all that to reproduce things. So I will never be dyeing in quantities. Um, but I do feel, even hearing you talk about the natural dyes, I'm kind of like, oh, I gotta,
and it's hard because I have friends who really want me to learn how to spin, and I'm just like, I keep going back and back and back, and I'm like, I can't, because then I know I'm gonna have to own sheep. I'm gonna have to like
Yes.
be growing my own wool. If I
Yeah,
keep going back to all the origins, then the next step is owning the sheep, and I just can't do that. So, I've resisted
gotta
the
stay
spin
away.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I had a whole business plan at one point for alpacas, like an alpaca farm. I was going to run and a mill, so I can relate.
Oh, cool.
But
Okay, cool.
I pulled back and decided that it's really the creative part and not necessarily the farming part where I exceed. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can relate. Yeah,
Yeah. There's just something I feel like that happens on a cellular level with us where it's like something just makes our heart sing, that goes, ah, this is something, you know.
and I wonder if it's unique. And again, I'm sure other artists and artisans will have different theories or different experiences. But I feel like when hooking, I thought, okay, well, I just love the hooking part, but then I'll get bored or it'll stop. Whereas I keep getting that feeling over like dyeing or a new technique or a new material and maybe natural dyeing. So it's never like I can't imagine ever being bored or
Right.
tire of it or not be able to get that feeling about some new part of the process that I haven't discovered yet.
No, same. I think it's true. It's just such a it's a really it's a forgiving art form, because we can rip things out so easily and start, again, or replace something so quickly. And it just is, I feel like it's also leaves us a lot of room to be as creative as we want to be, you
Mhm.
know, which is, I think, really cool. And probably people feel the same way about their
Yeah.
medium. But yeah, I really feel that way about cooking.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is there a material or tool or fabric? Like, do you have favorites of certain things that you're like, I could not work without?
For me, I think it would be the linen foundation. I just love the linen. And I took a class on weaving, a semester of weaving at the university to learn how to weave because I want to weave my own foundations. And so, yeah, I know it's like that thing where next I'm going to own a sheep. Um, but it's But I love the linen. I love working with the linen. And I haven't had the time to really pull it into my hooking yet. But I do like the linen as a foundation, and I use it for everything. Oh, that's not true. I do use some rug warp when I have something that's particularly, I really need to count the holes for some sort of a geometric piece, because the linen is very uneven, which is kind of how I am as a person. So it fits me that way. And otherwise, I don't think that, I like all the materials. Anything that I can pull is cool. Of course, I love dyeing the wool. I do like my pencil. I still have the very first pencil hook that my mom gave me. So I love that piece. Also, that tool is something that I'll never get rid of as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
How about
excited.
you? Something that you is that for you is like, oh, I couldn't do without this.
I am always changing my favorite thing.
Yeah.
So right now, it's upstairs because my hooking was upstairs from last night. It is a Ritchie hook. I used the same
Oh.
hook forever, like a little hook that I got at a garage sale, my rug hooking guild, that I was like, oh, I don't even know what this is. It's my favorite little hook. And then when I did a wide strip class last fall, I needed a bigger. And
Right.
so I had a Ritchie hook. I'd never once used it because it felt too big.
Mhm.
And now it's all I want to use. And I love it, love it, love
I'll have to
it.
try one someday. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Is
yeah,
it bent?
I do.
Is it bent with the big
It,
shaft? Is that why?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I have some Hartmans like that I use for when I teach, because I want to give everybody a chance to try different things.
yeah,
Because I mean, as teachers, we can tell when we're in person again.
yeah,
Um, we can tell right away whether somebody's a palmer or a pencil
yeah.
by how they pick it up, whether it's a palmer pencil hook. Um, and I'm more of a pencil hooker, and so the palming one is a little bit awkward, but I do use it when I'm using a wider cut for sure, because you just can't get the stuff through the backing. My wrist would be like, ah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I'd never had a bent hook prior to this. They were always straight. I'd never tried one.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
They're
I
kind
don't
of
know if it's the bent hook or it's the thickness of it too that I'm but I'm also doing wider cuts than I did at the beginning. So it might be the
mhm,
material that I need to yank through with less
mhm.
effort.
Yeah, yeah. Everything that makes it easier is better.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that always like that should be the lesson? Actually, I think I might need a t-shirt of that.
I
Whatever
just
makes
read a
it
book recently called Make It Easy by Susie Moore. I highly recommend it. And it's like,
easier.
how can I make this easier? Because we're all really good at making things complicated.
Yeah. Or just thinking they're complicated. I do that. Like
Oh yeah.
just decide in my head it's complicated
Hmm.
and then I do it and I'm like,
Overthink
oh
the heck
shoot.
out of it. I know if I just done it, the thinking of it was really a lot more difficult than the actual doing of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can relate to that 100%.
Yeah. And that takes time. Like I just feel like
Mhm.
I don't think I would have learned that when I was 20. Like
No,
anyway,
we have the capacity for that.
no. Um anyway, I do love linen and I can't wait to hear about your linen weaving venture. I think that is super, super exciting. Um, yeah. Are you
It's
going to be growing the linen?
I will not be growing the linen. Oh my goodness, flax is like a serious process.
Okay.
Although, you know what? People feel like that about natural dyes too. They're
Yeah.
like, when you do acid dyes, you could like go in the kitchen and have something in like 2 hours. You're done.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with with natural dyes. It's a process. So I guess I should never say never, but it might be interesting to grow a little bit of flax one day and just see what it's like to go through that whole retting process and
Yeah.
spinning it into yarn. I don't know. So I guess I should say never, but my
Yeah.
instinct, no,
It's not in the plan right now.
it's not on the plan right now.
Okay.
Although I did try to grow some cotton a couple of years ago. They failed, but just because I thought it would be kind of fun to see what that was like.
Yes. Oh, well, and now I have land for the first time and not
Oh,
like acre. I have an acre and a half, but
that's land. Yeah,
it's land compared to what I had. So
yeah.
I have a garden in my mind.
Hmm. I
So
have
I
some
think,
plants
yeah,
I could recommend.
what's that?
I have some plants I could recommend.
Yes, yes, yes. So many possibilities. Okay.
Yep.
What does, if again, if you can articulate it, and I think we've been talking about it already, but what does rug making do for you? Like, why do you keep doing it? Do you have a way to explain that?
So I think I touched on it earlier where it really it brings me back to me, and it grounds me in a way that nothing else I do does. Um, I shouldn't say nothing else, because the other thing I feel like that brings me back to me is being in nature.
Mm.
And when I go camping and hiking, I like to do hiking trips and camping trips and canoe trips, and I like to be out in nature a lot. And that also being in that kind of space um, just allows me to remember what it's like to just be a human on the planet, you know, and connect with myself and the planet in a way that um, I'm unable to do in my otherwise crazy life of, so many things are going on all the time. And so when I sit and hook, it just it brings me solace, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how to articulate it, but it brings me peace. It calms my mind. It allows my mind to open up in different ways in terms of the creativity, so that I'm not just this must get this done, must get that done. And I'm very left brain, right brain. I do data by day, but I am all about the creative arts. So um, letting that creative side of the brain have some breathing room, I think also just helps bring me back to me.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting to relate it to nature, because I think of some people who are not hookers, and
Hmm.
certainly you can feel that presence about them after a camping trip or when they've gone on, an adventure of some kind with nature. There's a certain peacefulness, and that I'm
Hmm.
not necessarily one of those. I like to sleep in a bed and not on the ground,
Yeah,
but I
that's
like
all good.
nature around me.
Hmm. That's all good too. There's
Yeah.
glamping. There's no shame in glamping.
um, but it is very comparable. And it's the first time I think I've heard somebody articulate it that way. Um,
Hmm.
that sense of like peacefulness of nature, and yet we can do it with a hook and a foundation cloth and sitting
Hmm.
over that process. So yeah, it's very interesting. Okay,
Hmm.
I have a rug that you sent me that I'm going to
Oh
share
yeah.
and that we're going to
Yeah.
talk about, and I can't wait to hear the story.
Yeah. I
Oh,
had a hard time selecting a rug, by the
I
way.
know. I know. And for people watching, I'll just remind you, I ask my guests to share just one. And I know that is super hard because you have many, many in your
Yeah.
repertoire, and they all have different meanings and stories. And so can you tell us about this one? Why did you share this one? And I do have there's a second photo of the backside, which I'll save in a minute.
Yeah. So this mat is called Dan's Pants All Over Europe. And the reason it's called that is because many years ago, I think it's dated 2014 on the back.
You want
My
there you
good
go.
friend, brother-in-law equivalent. Yeah, there's the back. So 2014. And so this was before I had any thoughts of like even starting a business or anything. This was when hooking was just still, my hobby, my amateur love hobby. Um, and he showed up one day with these army pants. They were Australian, old wool Australian. They were practically indestructible, these wool pants. And he has them and he's all, he's got them folded up in his hands very reverently. He never folds anything. The guy never folds a thing. But these were folded up neatly. And I knew these pants well because back in the 80s, they went on every outdoor camping, hiking, canoeing, everything that we did. If it was anything that was going to be remotely cold weather, those pants were there. Um, and he starts telling me all the stories about all the things that these pants have been through. And he said, I thought, maybe your sister said maybe you could use these in your hooking. And he's starting to get a little emotional. And I've never seen the guy emotional in my whole life. And he just looks down and he kind of looks up and he goes, these pants have been all over Europe. And I was so touched, and I just thought that's so sweet. And of course I could use them in my hooking. I would love to use them in my hooking. Thank you. And I woke up the next morning, I just was like, dance pants all over Europe. There we go. And so it's a map of Europe. And then he did most of his tours in Europe on bicycle. So that's what the bicycle wheel
Okay.
is for. And there's a button for the hub of the wheel. And then of course there's that, European flag in the background kind of thing. But yeah, so that's called Dance Pants All Over Europe.
Oh my
And
gosh.
one of the reasons I love this piece so much is because it has such meaning for him,
Mhm.
and knowing the story behind the pants. And um, yeah, when I gave it to him at Christmas, he very nearly cried, and it was really sweet to see and to witness that I could bring him that joy, through my art. And I just love using pieces of clothing that people um, have and they bring to me. I've done some things with my Aunt Shirley, had some crazy red plaid pants, and she loved her martini. So I did this, Aunt Shirley's martini with the pants in the background. And so that, things that have meaning for people are just they're so much more meaningful and fun to make, I think, and to bring that up, the surprise element as well. So that's why I chose these because I just love I love the story behind it, and I love doing that kind of thing. There are no natural dyes in here. This was before I learned how to natural dye, but I selected it because of the meaning of that wool, and you can see that wool is really pretty. The greens are just really very pretty.
It is beautiful. And I love in the back that you put a great label there, sort of with all the key parts, because we've been talking a lot about that with those around me. Finishing
Oh
rugs,
yeah.
labeling them.
Yes, no, exactly. And that's actually that patch was taken from the pockets. The pockets were cotton.
Yes.
So that's a piece of the cotton pocket that I used to make the label on the back.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
thank
Brilliant.
you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that rug. I totally agree. When there's something special and those stories, like
Mm,
how that, yeah, that part is kind of magical too. It's how we can weave in or hook in
mm,
the stories that are so meaningful to us and that they somehow just get in the fabric of it. And literally in this case with his
mm.
pants.
Yeah. And then live on, right? They live on and they live in a way that, he had them just stored in his cupboard because he had spilled some oil on them and he couldn't get the oil out. And that was the only reason those pants got retired.
Mhm.
And so they were just sitting in a cupboard and he just was so sad he wasn't going to let them go. But an opportunity of them turning into art, was like, oh, okay, they can live on
They
because
can
they've
live on.
already seen so much life.
Yeah. And be
Mhm,
enjoyed. Like every time you walk by the hallway where they're, mounted on the wall or wherever he has them or has the
mhm,
piece to just have that
mhm,
memory of warmth and
mhm.
magic.
Yeah, it is magic. Yeah, it is magic. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So
Mhm.
this isn't one of my questions, but I wanted to ask you, and I will put your link. So anybody watching this is like, I need to hear more from Jean Haley and about this natural dye process, or maybe in the fall. I'm imagining, I don't know if you have any more hat classes, but people that want to make your beautiful hat with you. Um, do you have anything coming up that you can share or go to your website or what would you like to tell people?
Yes. So I do. Thank you for asking. So I do. I have some a natural dye workshop coming up next week. I don't know when people are watching these, but next week is a very short lecture on indigo. But the following week, at the end of February, be 27, 28, and March 1st, I believe, is going to be a free mini workshop on natural dyes. There are a lot of myths out there about what's a natural dye and what's not a natural dye,
Mhm.
and don't believe the myths, please, because you will get bad results. And I want everybody to get good results, so that's why I do that first part free, because you learn the basics of this. You need to do these things, and if you do them right, then you'll have success. And so there's a full 8-week course that follows that if people want to do that. In the hat class will be offered again next year. If I can fit it in the fall, I would like to do that. Otherwise, it'll be in January. And so you can go to my website to see some of those. The descriptions of those classes are there. And as soon as registration is open, I will be telling everybody about them. So if you want to sign up for my newsletter, You could do that on my website. There should be a pop-up that comes up that says, "Hey, sign up for the newsletter," because the newsletters are always the first people to hear.
Yeah.
And if you sign up for the wait list, I almost always give the wait list a discount, early bird discount. So that's a little tip, inside tip.
Good to know. Okay, so the links will be below this on YouTube once it's uploaded. So that's
Yeah,
perfect. Thank you
yeah.
so much, Jean. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
And yeah, I'm so excited. I don't have space in my day to day right now for natural dye, but it is so exciting to me to know that it's like when I do, there's yet
Mhm.
another, it's sort of like that peeling the onion. There's always more goodness. And that
So
is a layer
true.
I look forward to definitely experimenting with soon. So
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much, Robin. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
perfect. Thank you.